Alrighty, so it's a couple minutes after, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to the September System Communicators Call. As probably all of you on know, this is the last of this particular kind of call. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. So the agenda for today is, I just wanted to take a few minutes in the beginning to talk about those pull-up banners that each of your offices should have received at the end of August. So we're going to talk about those for a minute, for a few minutes, and then we'll talk about the shift to the new CCE Communications Network that'll be happening next month. And I'm thinking that probably won't take the full hour. I mean, we can do Q&A and have discussion around everything, but if there are other items that anyone wants to talk about, please feel free to shout those out. So let's dive in. Anything anyone wants to bring to our attention before we dive into the banner discussion? And you're welcome to unmute yourself. I think I set it so that you would be automatically muted when you joined, but you can always unmute yourself and speak or use the chat box. Is everyone hearing me okay?
I hear you okay.
Thanks, Charlie. I just like looked up at our little microphone on the ceiling. Okay, so into the banner conversation. So we sent one of these banners to each of the association offices across the state. If you didn't get one or you haven't seen it, it would have been addressed to your executive director. But if for some reason you think yours is missing, please let me know, and we can sort that out. But this is something that you may have heard us chat about before. It's something that when I started about a year and a half ago, people were really asking for some sort of new signage that can be used at events to really highlight the fact that CCE is there. So Vicki, who's the executive director with Broome County, really kicked it off with an innovation proposal around updated pull-up style banners for associations. So we worked with a designer and we came up with this very, very simple banner design that's really intended to kind of highlight that cooperative extension is there at whatever event or meeting the banner is used at. And it's not really meant to be informative. It's more of like a backdrop. These are cooperative extension is here. It's a New York State program, which is the state outline, and then the URL. So the ones that you guys all received look like what's in the image here. So it's just Cornell Cooperative Extension, Innovation, Action, Impact were three words that we selected that we felt were representative of the system. And really the purpose behind this banner is it's a template that you can then use to create one that's more customized to your association or your program or team. So with that in mind, we've come up with a process for streamlining that process of customization if you wanted to order a banner now in the future, whenever it's an ongoing process. So the customizations that we have available through that streamlined process are updating the county name, or program or team. So Cornell Cooperative Extension of whatever county. The Innovation, Action, Impact text, that's also customizable. There's a character limit per line, so it's 3 lines and 22 characters per line. So the original idea is that it would be 3 kind of descriptive words, but it is, kind of flexible as long as you stick with the 22 character per line limit. And then of course, changing the URL to point to your specific office's website. And with the banner cost and the customization come to about 110. That's an estimate, and then shipping, depending on where it's going, will be a shipping cost for, I'm not sure if it's FedEx or UPS, but for shipping that. So if that's something that you're interested in, this link here, the brand.cce.cornell.edu/banners and signage, if you go to the CCE brand site, there's actually now a tab for banners and signage. And this is the only thing that's there right now, is this form that you can fill out to request to order a customized banner. And then if there are customizations beyond what's being offered through this form that your office is interested in, that would just require a couple of extra steps. We'd like to have a conversation between you and the designer and myself, just to make sure that it is on brand and from a design perspective is kind of feasible. So that's also an option as well. So any questions about the banner? Or comments or anything?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is this process kind of having a way for you to order signage that's customized to your county? Is that something that you think is useful going forward? Would you like to see more options or not?
I know the template, oops, am I on?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, I know the template that you guys have created, or any just kind of general the design is beneficial, especially for our office, because we don't have a lot of people who can do that design aspect. And then making it customizable is really easy to then just put in what we need. So I like this idea.
Great. Anything you wanted to add to my?
I think you just about covered it.
Right. Yeah, Sandy. So Sandy just chatted that she'd love to see a way to order business cards from one central portal. Yeah, that's a really good point. Right now on the brand site, we have a template that you can download and customize and save and share with your printer, and it's not very streamlined. So that would definitely be something that's useful, and I think to a lot of folks. There is an organization that I've been talking to that is based in Ithaca that does a lot of printing for departments on campus, and they are interested in creating, and it's just paper products. So I think they do posters and signs and stuff like that, but their main bulk of their work is paper products. So like letterhead, business cards, that kind of thing. And they're interested in creating a portal for CCE for that type of stuff. So that's something that I've been in conversations with them about. As it sort of moves along in the process, I'll reach out, I'll bring some of you along to make sure it works, to see if it suits the needs. But that's a really good point, Sandy, and I think it would be useful for a lot of folks to have that streamlined a little bit more.
At one point, I know I ordered cards directly through one of Cornell University's websites and they billed our department directly. Is that not an option anymore?
It is, but there's a bunch of different places that you can go. They don't necessarily have the template on file. So someone, depending on what place you select to order your business cards, they may or may not have a template on file that they can adjust, so you might have to do the adjustments on your end. It's just, yes, it's an option, Charlie, but it's not necessarily intuitive or streamlined, so it's less that it's not an option and more that we are trying to make it a little bit easier.
Okay, I understand. I only used it once when we were doing an Eat Smart Person's business cards. The rest of the time, I end up printing them on the stupid break apart paper because we don't really have the budget for anything else.
Right, right. Okay, excellent. Well, I think we will move on to the next slide. So the other item on the agenda today is to talk about our transition to the CCE communications teams. So everyone on this call, although there's a little bit of overlap, so some of you may not be as aware of this effort as others. So I'll give a little bit of background, and then we'll talk about how the transition is going to work and answer any questions that anyone has about this, this new structure. So apologies to those of you that have heard me say this a gazillion times, but we wanted to respond to some of the communications needs and concerns that were arising across the state. And as a team of two, we really needed to connect with folks out in the counties and in the programs to figure out what those needs are, how they're being addressed, what the different skill levels and the different expertise levels across the state are in terms of the various communications tasks that we do as a system. So we reached out to many of you. We reached out to all of the executive directors to talk through what are your needs, what are your challenges, how can we meet them, and how can we develop a support network that we facilitate from our office, but that extends to everyone throughout the state, with the idea that we would be able to connect some of the resources that we have in our office, that we have on campus with you, and that we could better support the system in that way. And then that it would be a way for us to continuously find out what the needs are and facilitate a way for us to work together on addressing them. Because as you know, every office has slightly different needs, slightly different challenges. And if we're able to get together to talk about them, we will be able to kind of address them and tackle them as a team. So that was the idea behind the communications network. We proposed a couple variations on the network approach. We workshopped it with some of the EDs to see what their preferences were, and talked to several of you about what your preferences might be. And we came up with something that's sort of modeled after the SBN structure. So we have formed these 7 different regional teams of people who are doing communications work. So that can vary from, in some cases, the executive director is the main communications contact. In some associations, there's a full-time communications professional. In some associations, there's kind of a shared communications role between educators or between a bunch of different staff. So anyone with any of those various ways of engaging with communications work is welcome to join whichever team represents their region. So we'll continue to meet once a month. However, there'll be 7 smaller meetings instead of 1 big one. And we're hoping that that'll be more discussion based and we can really dig in and use the calls to get some work done. And so I'm waiting for just a couple confirmations, and I'll be sending out the invites to those meetings today or tomorrow. And we'll kick them off in October. So the first round of meetings will be in October. So if you're on this call right now and you haven't received an invite, please reach out to me now or directly after the meeting and we can get you situated with one of the groups. the way we formed them was through anyone that was on the communications listserv was grouped by region, as well as any other communications contacts that executive directors provided me with. So if you're not in one of those groups, you may not have gotten an invite, but you're always welcome to join. Was there anything else I wanted to say there?
I think it's important to know that these conversations are not limited to the people in the group. If there are other folks on your staff who you think could benefit from particular conversations, by all means, invite them to join a call. You know, whether it's working on a particular project that you think they could benefit from or have input on, yeah, by all means, let them know.
Yeah, we want them to be as flexible as possible. And that sort of reminded me of another element of the group is that we started with this SBN structure because it's familiar, it's something we know. It's easy to kind of form groups in that manner. But several folks have pointed out that in terms of communications work, regional boundaries are not as important as, you know, some other aspects of shared experience. So we see this as a jumping off point to have these regional groups. Perhaps over time, as we really start to see various needs arise or various projects arise, the groups will be sort of fluid and maybe can sort of restructure around some of the larger overarching issues that we want to tackle, or you know, groups form based on sort of shared experience or shared need, or however that plays out. At the early stage, we thought it would be kind of premature to really force any sort of grouping other than what we kind of already had in the regional group approach. One point to note is that the invites have only at this point gone out to folks in area teams and associations. And so if anyone on this call is not part of an area team or part of an extension office, you probably didn't get an invite. That just is because we haven't, we are looking forward to structuring something similar for other partner programs, but we haven't fully launched that yet. So that's another group of folks that might be on this call and may have not heard from us about this effort recently anyway. Okay, so well, this is kind of redundant for all of you, but this was the definition of external communications that we proposed and modified through the process of coming up with this new structure. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's basically we have all these different audiences that we tell the cooperative extension story to through a variety of different mediums, print and digital. So when we're talking about these communications teams, it's really about the external communications efforts. So how we're sharing our information and our stories with the public. And also through the process of forming these teams, we identified these 5 key strategic goals. And again, these are a way to get started to kick off the efforts. It's more than likely that these goals will kind of change and morph, I guess, as time goes on into things that we identify as a group that we want to work towards. But these goals we put forth just as a way of summarizing what we learned from our conversations and surveys while we were designing this structure, this network. And so we tried to incorporate all of that feedback into these 5 key points, which I think I more or less mentioned originally, but just to give it another mention. So really being able to leverage the different resources and expertise that folks have across the system to try to standardize some of our procedures and some of our communications efforts so that we have a level of professionalism and consistency that's publicly recognizable. And then there's a kind of professional development component as well, identifying things that we need to work on, areas for training, where we as Extension Administration can help facilitate training and professional development opportunities. And then, of course, approaching challenges as a group so that we can make sure that we're not just representing the needs of, a vocal minority in kind of making changes and rolling out communications efforts. And then it's also a way for us to network with each other on an ongoing basis and get more familiar with some of the technologies that either the university supports or that we can use to keep in contact with each other and keep this effort going. So as I mentioned, the invite for the initial October meetings will be going out this week, and they'll be happening in October. I don't think any of them will be scheduled for the first week. And then my goal is to have that be a standing meeting, so each month at the same time we'll meet, so that we don't have to kind of try to organize every month and figure out a time. But with these kinds of groups, people's schedules change, so we will periodically revisit the meeting times so that we can make sure that as many people as possible are able to join in and engage. So the first meeting will be a time to introduce the groups, to set some expectations and goals. And then in November, we're going to talk more about templates. So there's a group of folks that have been discussing and working on some brochure and rack card templates. We'd like to get more input from more folks about those specific templates and then what templates are needed going forward. This is something we've talked about for a while and we've gotten input from several people on. But we will do kind of an update with where we are and where we want to go at the November meeting. Oh, and I wanted to note too, we set out the topics for these initial meetings, but going forward, I envision that I won't be setting the meeting topics. It'll be, they'll be identified on the calls together, and folks can propose topics that they want to talk about and conversations going forward. But for the initial meetings, we set up some topics to get the conversation started. So that's November, and then in December, one thing about this structure that several folks indicated that having an opportunity to be on a call with everyone from the whole system is really beneficial, and that these kind of monthly communicators calls are something that folks value. So we're not completely getting rid of this everyone can join kind of communications call. Quarterly, we'll be having a larger call with everyone where we'll have some sort of professional development opportunity or some sort of training opportunity. So we're hoping for December to show people what's called the Wyden Collective, which is a photo repository for Cornell. And we're working on a collection, a curated collection of CCE photos, and then a process for getting anyone's photos uploaded with the CCE naming convention. So that's what we're planning on talking about for the December call that involves anyone who wants to join. So I think that was it for my slides on, that was it for my slides on the new communications network, which is made up of the communications teams. That was quite long-winded, so I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has about any of that, or input, ideas. Did I cover everything?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Katie, I have a question in Sullivan County.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, once you jump off the calls after a couple of months, who will run the meetings?
I will continue to facilitate them. So, setting up the meeting time, putting together the agenda, taking minutes, following up with various items as needed. I plan to continue doing that until there's someone else that steps up to that role, or till it makes sense that someone else would be doing that. But I don't know.
That might not happen.
Yeah, I don't know that that'll necessarily happen. So I guess the answer is I'll continue to facilitate as long as I'm needed.
Thank you.
While everyone's thinking about digesting the information I shared, I really wanted to take another opportunity to thank many of you for your input throughout our designing of this process. A lot of you took the time to fill out the various surveys we sent. Several of you sent emails with additional context information about your own office and how this might or might not work. All of that information was very valuable to us, and we really, really appreciate it. And we hope that going forward, you'll still feel like you can reach out and let us know, hey, this is working, this isn't. Have you considered this? We really want to keep it organic and keep as many people involved and really get as many voices at the table as possible. So thanks, and keep it up.
I have just a quick question. So I know that the goal is to kind of have them self-propelling, I guess would be a great word to describe it. But if it feels like or seems like things are fizzling out, is there going to be some sort of suggestions, or will there be, because I'm just concerned that some of the groups are maybe my own group, or I'm just concerned about the propulsion without a guided agenda, I guess, with it being something that we're deciding what happens next.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I will continue to, I would make sure that there were some items to talk about and discuss, whether or not people proposed items for the agenda. I think there's a lot to talk about. So I don't see any really risk of running out of things to discuss and talk about. And RJ and I will continue to identify areas where we think there's opportunity for growth or opportunity for discussion or workshopping. So I understand your concern about things sort of fizzling out if, leadership is a shared thing. But I think as a facilitator, I'll really try to keep us motivated and keep topics on the agenda, even if they're proposed from us instead of from the groups.
Right, and as we're hoping people will kind of take agency and want to move forward with like their own ideas, but Katie is not going to be bowing out or stepping back. So she's going to kind of still be kind of maintaining that hub role of making sure things are moving.
Right. I hope that answers your question. And as we go forward, if we find out that there's some groups that are just not as active as others, we can, like I said, the groups themselves can be fluid, and we can kind of bring people onto projects or bring people into conversations or onto projects as becomes needed or apparent.
Right. The idea is really just kind of shrink the call that we have going right now, so that more voices can be heard, more voices will just maybe feel more comfortable stepping up and speaking and kind of sharing their needs with us that way.
Mhm. All right, so one other thing I wanted to mention that wasn't on the agenda, but we have started the accessibility team, which is 5 people from Extension Administration and Sandy Rep from Tompkins. We are kicking off a new effort, virtual office hours, to help with accessibility questions that folks have. So we've spent the last several months compiling a bunch of different resources on the various content types that we create. And so we have a pretty good sense of what sort of information and resources are out there. And we're hoping that these office hours will be a way for folks to tune in and say, I'm looking for guidance on this particular thing, can you help me? And we can point them to the resources that they might need, or walk through, you know, fixing some sort of issue that anyone might be having. So we're doing those the last Monday of the month in the morning. And I think with the exception of December, they'll always be the last Monday, but December we pushed it forward because of the winter break. So that is on the staff calendar. You can join through the staff calendar. And I think for the first month I'll be there. I'm not sure who else is joining me, but on next Monday I'll be there to talk through any accessibility issues. And then of course there's the cce-accessibility@cornell.edu email address where you can direct questions about accessibility stuff. And I envision that a lot of the time people will come with questions that we might not know the answers to, but we can work together and try to figure out how to get the answers. So hopefully those will be useful. Please share with your colleagues, anyone that's creating documents or doing website updates or anything related to content development. They can feel free to reach out to us, and definitely check out the website for the resources that are already up there. Any questions about that? All right, anything else that anyone wants to talk about? Doesn't have to be related to anything we've already talked about. Anything communications related that that we should discuss before we close out for the day?
This is Michelle from Lewis. I just want to say thank you very much for working on all of this. I really appreciate it, and we appreciate getting the banner.
Thanks, Michelle. Alrighty, well, feel free to reach out to RJ or I at any point, and be on the lookout for those invites to the first communication team meetings. And if you haven't been contacted about them yet, let me know and I will add you to the list. And so that you'll get an invite. If there's nothing else, I think that'll be it for today. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Yep.